My dad's a deranged villain, my mom's a gloomy wallflower. Right when Dad was about to pull off some illegal scheme, I shoved a moral studies exam paper into his hand. Teacher said only a perfect score gets you a little red flower. Thing is, I'm terrible at school. So he had no choice but to slave away writing the answers for me. When Mom reached for a fruit knife to slash at herself, I thrust an apple into her palm. Mom, I want apples without the peel, cut into chunks on toothpicks, please. Mom whipped up a bunny-shaped apple in seconds flat. The bullet comments flashed across the screen. Me. Who's the brainless face now? The villain couple came to the orphanage to adopt a kid. I was playing with mud in the yard. I looked up and saw a flurry of bullet comments zip by. I froze, staring at the patches on my clothes, then patted my empty pocket, only a candy wrapper inside. The headmistress walked over smiling, wiping the mud off my hands. Today, a kind couple is going to adopt either you or Lila. I frowned in confusion. Headmistress, what's a fanby? My opinion was terrible. I'd mispronounced villain as fanby. The headmistress thought for a second. It means turning defeat into victory. They're the winning side. Me, Clara Jiang, loved being around strong people. I didn't care about loads of love, I wanted loads of money. I looked up, and a stunningly handsome man and beautiful woman were walking over. I bounced over 3 steps at a time, clinging to the man's thigh. Adopt me. I'm super well behaved. As the second prettiest kid in the orphanage, I scoffed at petty tactics like fighting for attention. I saw Lila Gu hiding deliberately in the corner, trying to make herself invisible. Clearly, she didn't want to be adopted. The bullet comments went wild. Wait till this supporting actress gets home and finds the deranged villain dad and gloomy wallflower mom, both holding knives. Then she'll learn how scary the villain couple really is. My new mom stroked my head, her smile gentle but her face etched with exhaustion. I hugged her and gave her a kiss. Mom, why are you hurt? Her shoulders tensed, then she hugged me back even tighter, her damp tears soaking my shoulder. Right, I'd forgotten. Gloomy mom was also a crier who couldn't hold back her tears. Villain dad grabbed the straps of my overalls and dumped me into the back seat of their car. The soft, comfy child seat made me want to pass out instantly. The villain couple was amazing. I'd have full bellies, a bed to sleep in and new clothes to wear. 2. The next day I noticed something was off. Furious shouting and the sound of things smashing came from Dad's study. From Mom's room there were thudding noises and the smell of blood seeped under the door. The bullet comments started acting up again. Mom and Dad both had a little kid inside them, just like Clara. They needed love just as much. Bad comments. You know nothing. I knocked on Mom's door, holding a roll of gauze in one hand and an apple in the other. Mom, I want an apple peeled, please. Mom's pale face softened. In a few swift moves she carved a bunny-shaped apple. I ate it with relish and a smile slowly spread across her face. Clara, what do you want for lunch today? I rattled off the dishes without hesitation. Sweet and sour pork ribs, shredded chicken, kung pao chicken, spicy fish. Mom focused intently on jotting down the menu. Give me 2 hours. She tore off the gauze, wrapped it around her, wound haphazardly to stem the bleeding, then turned and headed for the kitchen. Next I knocked on Dad's door. His face was still livid with rage and the floor was littered with shredded documents. According to the bullet comments, his constant rivalry with the hero couple would leave him no time to run his company, leading to its bankruptcy. And then the villain family would end up living in poverty. I shook my head fiercely. I'd never let that happen. I pulled out my 6-point politics exam paper and looked at him innocently. Dad, the teacher wants a parent's signature. Dad glanced at it dismissively. Is it out of 10 points? I frowned in confusion. It's out of 100. Dad's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Your old man was top of his class back in the day, got into college without even taking the entrance exam. And you're telling me you scored 6 points in politics? You'd get a higher score if you just stepped on the paper. He scowled deeply but still scrawled his signature on it. I stared at him with big watery eyes. Dad, if you score over 90, you get a little red flower. My pitiful expression made it obvious what I wanted. He sighed. How about I make you 100 little red flowers instead? I shook my head, refusing to back down. Dad sighed again. Hand me the textbook. I placed the brand new moral studies textbook in his hands. Sure enough, both of them were kept busy from that day on. Mom, a notorious kitchen disaster, signed up for 5 cooking classes in a row, determined to master Sichuan, Shandong, Hunan, Cantonese cuisines and desserts in record time. Dad, a man teetering on the edge of criminality, dedicated himself to cramming through moral studies material from elementary school all the way to university level. I watched them bustling about and a satisfied smile spread across my face. Busy, everyone being busy was a good thing. 3. Beneath the surface of this happy family, hidden waves were stirring. Dad dressed himself up to look suave and handsome, more than capable of fooling anyone. Mom dressed like a princess and I looked like a little princess standing beside her. We walked in hand. A murmur of whispers swept through the room. I could feel Mom's grip on my hand tighten. She'd never liked these fancy parties. The villain couple's marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement. Dad had chased after his white moonlight in vain, and finally settled for marriage out of obligation. Mom had pined for her childhood sweetheart for years, only to lose out to his love at first sight and left heartbroken. They put on a decent show in public though. But today fate had it that we ran into the hero couple. The bullet comments went haywire. I glanced at Dad, his eyes were bloodshot, his left hand hovering over his suit pocket, his right hand holding a cocktail glass, which he drank from with a look of deep-seated hatred. My heart dropped. I had to stop Mom and Dad from getting into trouble. I let go of Mom's hand and weaved nimbly through the crowd. I tugged on Dad's sleeve and quietly pulled out the packet of powder from his pocket. It was real. I was trying my best to avoid being seen and dump the powder into the trash can when suddenly someone darted in front of me. My hand slipped and the powder spilled all over the wine glass on a waiter's tray. A little boy about my age stared at me, his expression indifferent but his eyes glinting with curiosity. I clapped my hand over his mouth and told him to pretend he'd seen nothing. I stuffed a handful of candies into his palm as a bribe. My heart ached, those were my precious, well-hoarded candies. I picked up the wine glass, about to pretend I'd accidentally knocked it over when Dad spotted me sharp-eyed, scooped me up into his arms, snatched the wine glass from my hand and downed it in one gulp. My sweet daughter looking out for her dad, even bringing me wine. I felt a surge of guilt. I ran over to Mom's side. Dad's drunk, he needs to go upstairs to rest. Don't run off. I'll take him to his room and come right back for you. Mom instructed. I sat obediently on a stool. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the little boy from earlier surrounded by 2 or 3 other kids. Looked like they were bullying him. I hitched up my princess dress. As the top tough girl in the orphanage, I'd never let any kid get bullied right under my nose. I marched over to them, full of righteous anger. But as soon as I stood in front of them, the other kids burst into tears and ran off screaming. Me? Was I that scary looking? I touched my cheeks, soft and squishy, definitely cute. I poked the little boy's cheek. He frowned slightly. Elliot Zhao. My eyes lit up and I quickly introduced myself. I'm Clara Jiang. I'm 8 years old. I can sing and dance. My mom and dad. I was about to keep rambling when Elliot Zhao's eyes drooped, looking thoroughly miserable. He mumbled a single word, sleepy. As a helpful kid, I was definitely gonna stick around to keep him company. I hopped along beside him to his room. He gave me several pointed looks and I reluctantly conceded. Boys and girls shouldn't sleep together technically. But if you really can't bear to be without me, I'll agree reluctantly. Then, ignoring his look of utter shock, I snuggled up to him just like I did with my stuffed bear, a baby, and drifted off to a peaceful sleep. But as I was drifting off, a thought nagged at me. Mom had told me to do something earlier. What was it again? Oh well, my brain was already shut down for the night. Meanwhile, the bullet comments were buzzing with activity again. The next day I rubbed my eyes and finally remembered what the bullet comments had said. Oh no, this was bad. I didn't even bother putting on my shoes and ran straight to Dad's room. A crowd had gathered outside the room, every single one clutching cameras and flashlights, ready to capture the villain's scandal. They'd really gone all out for this. Leading the pack was the male protagonist, his brows dark with anger as he banged loudly on the door. No one answered for a long time. For a group of eyes stared fixatedly as my dad stumbled out, his clothes disheveled. Peeking out from behind him was my mom, her face flushed with shyness. I let out a sigh of relief, then my heart promptly leaped back into my throat. I'm in a hotel room with my own wife, Dad said, his voice laced with menace. What exactly are you all doing here? The reporters, sensing trouble, turned tail and fled in a flash. The male protagonist shot a wary glance into the room. Mom twisted my ear gently, her voice filled with worry. Where did you run off to? I rolled my eyes playfully. I went to help the weak and helpless. He was so pitiful, I'm such a kind-hearted person. Neither of them believed a word I said, but seeing that I was unharmed and hadn't been wronged, they didn't press the issue further. They hurried me away from this mess of a place. My small hands clenched into fists. They weren't heartless villains at all, they were my best mom and dad in the whole world. My parents insisted on sending me to an elite private school. No matter how hard I begged or tried to weasel my way out of it, It was no match for Dad's casual remark. I'm at my wit's end. Might as well leave her education to the teachers. Making a self-proclaimed genius villain utter such a defeated line. If nothing else, I had a talent for that. Sure, the elite school had great food, gentle teachers, and regular holidays. But the male and female protagonists went here too. Was I just supposed to walk in and be cannon fodder for them? I clung to Dad's trouser leg, begging and pleading with him. It didn't soften his heart one bit. I turned to Mom instead. She just handed me a box of cookies and told me to share them with my classmates. Of course. Once Dad made up his mind, there was no changing it. I prayed with all my heart that I wouldn't be placed in the same class as the protagonist couple. But lo and behold, Dad waved a hand grandly, donated 2 entire school buildings, and got me into the top academic class. Seriously, Dad? Totally unnecessary. So there I stood, holding the cookie box, staring across the classroom at the young male and female protagonists. I was so angry I wanted to smash the cookie box over both their heads. The teacher told me to pick my seat. Instead of heading for the spot right between the 2 protagonists, I turned and sat next to the boy by the window who looked like he was about to fall asleep. He propped his head up impatiently and shot me a glare. I slammed the cookie box down on his desk with a loud clatter. For you. I looked at him with a deeply troubled expression. He frowned. Are you giving me a gift? Or trying to send me to my grave? A faint smile tugged at his lips, more amused than annoyed. His name was written clearly in the class roster, Elliot Zhao. That sounded familiar. I became the villain's most loyal ally. When the villain ate cookies, I wiped the crumbs off his mouth. When the villain took a nap, I fanned him to keep him cool. When the villain went to the bathroom, I offered to pull down his pants for him. He grabbed my hand firmly. That part's not necessary. You can wait outside. What a shame. After a busy day of dedicated service, I finally managed to get the villain sent to the school infirmary. I followed Elliot Zhao anxiously, while he himself remained perfectly calm. The doctor scolded him lightly for eating so many cookies when he was allergic to wheat. He needed 4 drips. I apologized to Elliot Zhao, feeling terrible about it. He didn't seem to mind at all. I really liked the gift you gave me, he said. Then in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. It's the first gift I've ever received. I didn't catch what he said. But the bullet comments did it for him. The bullet comments erupted into chaos. Watching the villain break free from the clutches of the plot-mandated love line filled me with immense satisfaction. 5. Lila Gu came to find me on her own accord. She told me I'd stolen the happy life that should have been hers. I pointed to myself, dumbfounded. Me? The villain family you turned your nose up at? Lila Gu ranted and raved through her tears, every word contradicting her earlier behavior of wanting nothing to do with the villain couple. A crowd of students passing by in the hallway stopped to watch our confrontation, clearly intrigued. Many of them, without bothering to get the full story, rushed to comfort the tearful Lila Gu, while hurling insults at me, the innocent bystander who'd done nothing wrong. I snapped. Are all of you blind? I'm standing 3 feet away from her. Not even a single strand of my hair has touched her. But the crowd was too blinded by Lila's tears to care about the truth. I was promptly ostracized by the entire class. Even my desk mate Elliot Zhao got dragged into it by association. Well, at least I had cookies to munch on. They were delicious. I loved sitting in the sun eating cookies. Meanwhile, the male protagonist Finn, he loved playing basketball. The basketball court was directly in my line of sight. Did you hear? Clara Jiang has a crush on the school heartthrob Finn He. She's two-timing him with Elliot Zhao. I feel so bad for Elliot. I never thought Clara Jiang was such a terrible person. First she bullies Lila Gu, then she tries to steal her boyfriend. Excuse me? What did I, Clara Jiang, ever do to any of you? Even Elliot Zhao started looking at me weirdly. My meal buddy of days gone by had suddenly abandoned me. I wasn't about to stand for that. I grabbed Elliot Zhao by the collar right then and there, demanding an explanation. Why are you avoiding me? I pulled so hard that all the buttons on his shirt popped off. His lunchbox fell to the floor, spilling its contents everywhere. Elliot Zhao twitched the corner of his mouth, his expression impassive. Aren't you already in love with someone else? Why are you even here with me? I stared at him, completely confused. You believe rumors now? You really don't know me at all. The only things on my mind are fried chicken, roast duck, hamburgers, fries, and pizza. I poked him lightly in the chest. His frown softened and he snatched my lunchbox from my hands. We'll share. As the bottom 2 students in the class, Elliot Zhao and I were well on our way to becoming the ultimate villain duo. Parent-teacher conference day arrived. Dad came to attend it. So did Finn He's mom. The villain versus the female protagonist, Sparks were about to fly. I dragged Elliot Zhao to the playground to play, keeping a close eye on the parent-teacher conference via the bullet comments. I sighed deeply, filled with worry. Me. I don't want Fin He to be my tutor, I exclaimed. Elliot Zhao clenched his fists tightly. I can tutor you instead. I burst out laughing. The second-to-last student tutoring the absolute last student? What a gathering of unfortunate souls this was going to be. Elliot Zhao looked at me confused. You don't believe me? I nodded emphatically. If you manage to get first place in the next exam, I'll beg my dad to hire you as my tutor. As the parent-teacher conference drew to a close, Dad approached the female protagonist, looking ready to ask about getting Fin He to tutor me. There was still a hint of lingering affection in his eyes. It seemed the original plot's romantic tension was still lingering. I rushed over, dragged Dad over to Elliot Zhao and launched into a glowing introduction of him. I sang his praises to the heavens, making Fin He sound like dirt in comparison. After all, the bullet comments had been trashing us villains non-stop. Turnabout was fair play. Lila Gu threw herself into the female protagonist's arms, tears streaming down her face. The female protagonist, moved by her supposed resilience, declared loudly, Mr. Jiang, you refused to take Lila in all those years ago. Well, now I'm going to adopt her as my goddaughter. Were those crocodile tears she was shedding? And the bullet comments were so fickle. Lila Gu had looked down on the villain family before. Now she was complaining about them not wanting her? Just because someone was labeled a protagonist didn't automatically make them the good guy, did it? Dad, ever the domineering Xiu, turned ashen-faced at the sight. Whatever lingering goodwill he'd had for the female protagonist vanished without a trace. I high-fived Elliot Zhao excitedly. Who could have predicted that a week later, the protagonist couple would move into the villa right next door to ours? 6. Our new neighbors came over bearing housewarming gifts. Mom accepted the gifts politely, but her gaze lingered on the male protagonist's face for a moment too long. It seemed the male protagonist still held some sway over her heart. I couldn't blame her though. My maternal grandparents had been very strict with her when she was young, making her a shy and introverted child. A childhood sweetheart's romance straight out of a storybook. One day she'd taken a shortcut home from school and run into a gang of thugs. 10 against 1. Even though Mom was skilled in taekwondo and jujitsu, she couldn't fight them all off alone. She'd been kicked hard and all the money in her school bag had been stolen. Her childhood sweetheart had happened to pass by, beaten up the gang leader and gotten her money back for her. The classic damsel in distress scenario had turned her head completely. She chased after him relentlessly, only to have her heart broken again and again. My abysmal exam scores hung over my family like a dark cloud. Even Mom, who'd never cared about my grades before and only worried about whether I'd eaten and slept well, looked at my test papers in utter disbelief. 2 Ivy League graduates staring at test scores so low you'd get higher marks by accidentally stepping on the paper, they looked absolutely miserable. Maybe we should ask the he boy next door to tutor her, Mom suggested hesitantly. Kids her age might get along better. I tensed up immediately. Dad was quick to object. Clara's deskmate is a smart kid too. We can ask that Xiao boy to tutor her instead. That was when I realized I'd made a huge mistake with my earlier boasting. Mom hesitated for a moment, then made her decision. Tell the Xiao boy to come over next week to tutor you. I was about to politely decline on Elliot Xiao's behalf. But then Mom hit me with the alternative. If Elliot couldn't do it, we'd ask Fin He instead. Left with no other choice, I quickly pulled out my phone and shot Elliot a message. Ching Ching Clara. Can you get first place in the next exam? Sweating Ching Ching Clara. My parents want you to be my tutor. You need to put on a good show, don't let them find out the truth. Elliot he. Ching Ching Clara. Don't do anything stupid. I don't want us to end up in jail together. Elliot, trust me. Pat, would you like me to help you continue translating the next chapter of this story? I really wanted to trust Elliot Zhao, but his academic track record just didn't inspire confidence. I had no choice but to come up with all sorts of schemes to stall my parents. One more day of delay was one more day of safety. They loved me so much, surely they wouldn't kill me for scoring a 0 on my exams, right? The final exams ended. The results came out the very next day. I stared in disbelief at the ranking list. Elliot Zhao had taken first place while I remained firmly rooted in last place. I pulled him aside and whispered urgently, "No matter what, you didn't cheat, did you?" Elliot Zhao let out a low chuckle. "No cheating, I promise. Don't worry." Unsurprisingly, not a single soul in the class, not even the teachers, believed his results. He was hauled off for a private chat and made to take another set of exams on the spot. And yet again he scored near-perfect marks in every single subject. He ruffled my hair with a grin. "I'll come over to tutor you next week." I was outraged. We'd made a pact to be slackers together. How dare he secretly turn into an overachiever and wow everyone. Meanwhile, I was still stuck being a useless little slacker who couldn't even flip herself over. Forced into a corner by circumstances, I had no choice but to let Elliot Zhao tutor me. He put on the airs of a straight-A student so convincingly that within minutes, my parents were smiling from ear to ear, thoroughly impressed. They practically shoved us into my room and ordered us to start studying. I jumped up and smacked him lightly on the arm. "We agreed to be slackers together. Why did you have to go and secretly turn your life around?" Elliot Zhao looked faintly wronged. "I couldn't just stand by and watch Finhee tutor you, could I?" I thought about it for a second and realized he had a point. I didn't notice the faint whiff of jealousy lingering in the air. Mom walked in carrying a plate of fruit, her eyes red-rimmed. "Your neighbor's aunt has been kidnapped. Your dad." I instantly understood what was going on. Mr. He was convinced Dad was behind the kidnapping and had stormed into his company to make trouble. Right now the place was probably swarming with reporters and police officers. I couldn't agree more with that last comment. Mom was sad because she was worried about Dad, not because she was pining over her ungrateful childhood sweetheart. 7. Once upon a time, Mom had been head over heels in love with her childhood sweetheart. My maternal grandfather had even offered to transfer 20% of his company shares to him, on the condition that he marry Mom. But that childhood sweetheart, now Mr. He, was a total ingrate. He'd accepted the engagement, taken the shares, then dumped Mom right before the wedding, claiming he'd met the love of his life. Back then he just lost a bitter power struggle within his own family and been kicked out of the house, destitute. Mom, feeling sorry for him, hadn't even asked for the shares or her dowry back. She'd lost both her heart and her family's money. By the time Mom and I arrived at Dad's company, the entrance was already packed with a mob of people. Atlas, he stood there, his face twisted with rage. "Xiaoyan, tell Jiang to hand over my wife right now." Mom refused to believe Dad was capable of something like this. Dad sat in his office chair, chain-smoking one cigarette after another. The smoke shrouded his face, making him look tired and haggard beyond his years. "What are you two doing here?" he asked hoarsely. "I've found the location where Zara Jiang is being held hostage," he said abruptly. "After all, she's my sister." With that, he stood up and hurried out of the room, not even sparing a glance at Mom's crestfallen expression. Zara Jiang was Dad's adopted sister. She'd taken advantage of his childhood crush on her to leech off him for years, studying art, studying abroad, traveling the world. Living the high life while giving him nothing in return. But every time Dad had mustered up the courage to propose to her, she'd shot him down with the excuse that they were family, even calling him disgusting for having such thoughts about his own sister. Then at the busiest, most stressful time for Dad's company, she'd suddenly married Atlas, he, her so-called true love, leaving Dad heartbroken. He'd almost driven the entire company into bankruptcy in his despair. It wasn't until he'd entered into a business marriage with Mom, who'd also been nursing a broken heart back then, that he'd managed to turn things around. Now, under Dad's leadership, Jiang Group was thriving, leaving He Group far behind in the dust. If it weren't for the lingering goodwill between our parents, the protagonist's company would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. Mom patted my head, telling me to go hide at Elliot Zhao's house for a while. She stayed behind to guard the company in case any more emergencies popped up. As for Dad, he was already on a helicopter flying toward a certain strait. Was the plot really gonna twist this way? Elliot Zhao showed up later, sent by Mom to bring me a change of pajamas. My eyes lit up. I threw myself into his arms, knocking the pajamas out of his hand in my excitement. "Do you want to go on a trip with me?" I asked eagerly. Elliot Zhao blinked in surprise. "Where to?" I grabbed his hand tightly. "To the ends of the earth. To save my love-struck, disaster-prone parents, of course." A faint flush crept up his ears. I didn't notice. Somehow I managed to talk Elliot Zhao into coming with me to a place called the Ends of the Earth. When we arrived, the kidnappers were haggling with Dad over the ransom money. Atlas, he, Zara Jiang's husband, just stood off to the side like a useless bystander, not saying a single word to help. Dad, thinking he'd reached an agreement with the kidnappers, picked up the ransom money and started walking toward them. Suddenly one of the kidnappers lunged at him, a knife glinting in his hand. I screamed and ran forward to save Dad, only to be yanked back sharply by Elliot Zhao at the last second. Meanwhile, Atlas, he, who'd been standing right next to Dad, ran away faster than a scared monkey. Zara Jiang screamed Dad's name, begging him for help. The knife plunged into Dad's body, red blood blooming like a flower against his white shirt. Blood spilled everywhere. The once arrogant, domineering Xiao Jiang now knelt on one knee, clutching his wound in agony. The kidnappers, emboldened by their success, moved in for the kill. Then the thunderous roar of a helicopter echoed overhead. Mom, dressed in a flowing white dress, rappelled down from the helicopter on a rope. "Asher Jiang," she screamed. "You have to stay alive. For me." The gentle, soft-spoken mom I knew was gone. Her eyes were red with tears, and she unleashed years of pent-up frustration, using her long-forgotten taekwondo skills to beat the kidnappers to a pulp. But one of the kidnappers, refusing to give up, snuck up behind her while she was distracted, a knife hidden in his hand ready to strike. 8. Dad mustered up every last ounce of strength left in him to yank Mom behind his back, taking the knife meant for her straight to the chest. The male and female protagonists emerged from the ordeal completely unscathed. As for my villain parents, one was unconscious, the other injured and bleeding. Dad was rushed to the ICU for emergency surgery. Mom, with a limp, was taken to a neighboring ward for treatment of her own injuries. I went over to comfort her. "Mom, Dad never had real feelings for his adopted sister. You're the only one he truly loves." Mom, her head wrapped in bandages, stared down at her hands, her voice soft and broken. "Clara, I got it all wrong. The boy who saved me in that alleyway all those years ago. It was your dad, Asher Jiang." It turned out that once upon a time the protagonists and the villains had all been classmates in the same school, same class. Fate really had a twisted sense of humor. The boy who'd saved Mom from the gang of thugs had been the quietest, most introverted boy in the class, Asher Jiang. Her childhood sweetheart had never cared about what had happened to her at all, which was why he'd never mentioned the incident to her. Mom cooked a pot of chicken soup and brought it to the ICU. The tall, imposing Xiao who'd always seemed invincible now lay in the hospital bed, his face pale as a sheet, a few strands of white hair visible at his temples. "Asher Jiang, do you know how long I've been looking for you?" Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. Dad's voice was choked with emotion as he reached out to wipe her tears away. "Eleanor Chin, do you know how long I've been looking for you?" When Mom was a little girl, she'd spent a summer vacation in the countryside, where she'd met a young boy who was going through a period of severe depression and social withdrawal. That boy had been Dad. Their families had been neighbors back then, but they'd barely spoken to each other. Every day Mom, dressed in a little white dress, would walk past his house, occasionally picking a few dewy wildflowers in the morning and tucking them into the mailbox outside his door. And every day Dad would wait in the courtyard just to catch a glimpse of her passing by. That little girl in the white dress, wearing a hat decorated with a white ribbon, humming a cheerful tune. She'd been his only ray of hope during the darkest time of his life. Years later, when he'd met Zara Jiang, who also happened to love wearing white dresses, he'd been caught off guard by the familiarity of it all, mistakenly believing she was the little girl from his childhood. On Mom's side, her childhood sweetheart had hated seeing her in dresses, especially plain white ones. After that, she'd never worn a white dress again. And so, the gears of fate had finally clicked into place. 9. While Dad was hospitalized, he group had started acting like a rabid dog, trying to tear off a chunk of Jiang group for themselves. They'd used the news media to spread all sorts of malicious rumors. CO Asher Jiang of Jiang Group is fighting for his life in the hospital. The company is now being run by his wife, who has zero experience in business. Panic had spread like wildfire. The stock market had gone into a tailspin. Even at school I could hear the whispers and gossip everywhere. Now that Lila Gu had become the He family's adopted daughter, her status in the class had skyrocketed. Meanwhile, I'd become the most hated girl in the entire grade. To make matters worse, Elliot Zhao had taken a leave of absence from school and wasn't around to defend me. "Clara Jiang, I heard your family's about to go bankrupt." A girl sneered, holding out a cookie. "Here, I'll pity you and give you one of these. They're imported from Switzerland. Bet you'll never get to taste anything this good ever again." "Clara, is it true your family's going broke? I heard poor people smell sour. Now that I think about it. You do kind of smell, don't you?" Another classmate said, pinching her nose and running away in disgust. I couldn't have cared less about their petty insults. Even my homeroom teacher had pulled me aside, beating around the bush to ask about my family's actual financial situation. "You know tuition at this elite school is very expensive," she said awkwardly. "Do you think your family can still afford it?" I pressed my lips together, unamused. I already paid the tuition for this entire academic year at the beginning of the semester. During PE class, Lila Gu ordered me to put the basketballs back in the equipment room. I didn't need to use my brain to know she was plotting something nasty. Sure enough, the second I pulled the door shut behind me, I heard the sound of a lock clicking into place from the outside. The door wouldn't budge. I rolled my eyes, completely unimpressed. I simply opened the window and jumped out, only to land directly on top of someone. A low grunt of pain escaped his lips. I slowly climbed off him, sheepish. "Are you okay?" I asked. It was Elliot Zhao. His face was covered in sweat. He looked up at me, concern written all over his face. "Are you okay?" I sat there, frozen right on top of his legs. I could swear I heard a faint cracking sound. I helped Elliot Zhao limp to the school infirmary. He'd only just returned to school and now he had to leave again. His right leg was put in a cast. He had to walk around with a cane, limping heavily. We made quite the pair, the class's resident disaster duo. One of us looked like she was having a hard time. The other actually was. Mom was still swamped with work, trying to keep the company afloat. The college entrance exam was drawing near. Everyone else in the class was either applying to study abroad, preparing to inherit their family businesses, or both. Meanwhile, I, a total academic failure, had no choice but to pin all my hopes on the exam. I pulled out my high school textbooks and started studying like my life depended on it. Would you like me to help you polish the dialogue in this chapter to make it more vivid and in line with the characters' personalities? My brain felt like a rusty gear that hadn't been oiled in years, stuck solid, unable to turn. Elliot Zhao took his role as my tutor seriously. He nagged me to study every single day and even crafted a customized study plan just for me. He called it the Chicken to Eagle Growth Program. I threw myself into my studies with the intensity of someone hanging their hair from the beam and stabbing their thigh with an awl to stay awake. Elliot's family treated me with nothing but kindness. In this world that revolved entirely around the male and female protagonists, villains were supposed to have tragic, miserable lives. Elliot Zhao's current happy life was half my doing, if I did say so myself. I'd catch myself grinning like an idiot mid-exercise, patting myself on the back for a job well done. Elliot always seemed to see right through me, though. He'd roll up a test paper and bonk me on the head to snap me out of it. After 3 months of this brutal training regimen, I survived the college entrance exam. My dad, my mom, and Elliot Zhao, still hobbling on his cane, were waiting for me at the school gate holding bouquets of flowers. "Wait a second. Elliot Zhao, you didn't take the exam?" I asked in surprise. He tilted his head and glanced up at the sky, acting all nonchalant. "I got early admission." 2 weeks into summer vacation, the news that Jiang Group had acquired He Group sent shockwaves across the entire internet. Even though Mom hadn't been involved in business for years, the legend of her incredible business acumen still lingered in the industry, how she'd wowed everyone with her talent when she dabbled in it as a college student. She'd been hailed as a business prodigy. Grandpa had even once considered retiring early and handing the reins of his company over to her. But then her childhood sweetheart had opened his mouth and said, "Girls belong at home taking care of their husbands and children." And Mom, ever the obedient one, had stayed home. Now though, Asher Jiang was utterly captivated by every little thing Eleanor Chen did, marveling at her every hidden talent. He hung on her every word, agreeing with whatever she said. As for the protagonist couple and their family, they were forced to return all the stolen shares, file for bankruptcy, and cut their losses just to survive. Even Lila Gu and Finn He's study abroad plans fell through. Their family could only afford to send one of them overseas. Lila was the one who got thrown under the bus, forced into a business marriage with another family just to prop up the He family's last shred of glory. The so-called destined love between the male and female protagonists turned out to be nothing more than a joke. No one saw hide nor hair of Lila Gu or Finn He at the graduation party. As the saying goes, a fracture takes 100 days to heal. Elliot Zhao's cast was still on, and he'd had zero interest in attending the party. So there I was, all dressed up in a fancy princess dress, sitting off to the side and eating petit fours like it was no big deal. Lots of boys tried to ask me to dance. I turned them all down. I lifted the hem of my dress and wandered toward the quieter corner of the garden. That's when I spotted the edge of a wheelchair. I grinned and teased, "Elliot Zhao, you're such a tsundere. May I have this dance?" The cool, indifferent expression on Elliot's face cracked instantly. He stumbled over his words, panicking so much he tried to wheel himself away. Like I was gonna let him get away that easily. I grabbed the wheelchair handles and stopped him in his tracks. "I just wanted to come see you," I said softly. Of course I knew he'd missed me, how could I not? I was feeling mischievous. I dragged Elliot out to the lawn, tossed his cane aside, hopped into the wheelchair myself, and zoomed down the gentle slope, laughing gleefully. Elliot, left with no choice, hobbled after me as fast as he could on his crutches. "Claire Jiang, this is dangerous. Do you understand? he yelled, chasing after me. Stop right now. I ignored him completely. The next thing I knew, he dropped his crutches, ripped off his cast, and given me a lesson I'd never forget. My butt and legs ached for days afterward. I won't do it again, I mumbled, rubbing my sore bottom. Spoiler, I totally would do it again. After all, Elliot Zhao loved me to bits. I was the lucky charm of the villain lair. Would you like me to help you craft a sweet epilogue for this story, showing Clara and Elliot's happy life years later?